Hi everyone. You'll notice that my environment looks a little bit different today. That's because I'm recording this from my office at work. So today I want to talk about something that actually just came up. Last time I talked to you all about my top 10 favorite action adventure movies of the 1930s. And you may remember, if you've watched those, and if you haven't, I recommend you do, that in my it was a three-part series because I could not talk about all 10 of them in just one 15-minute video. But in my part three, I mentioned that my favorite action adventure movie of the 1930s was 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood, and I capped it all off by urging you to seek it out. Well, I had a friend point out to me that, well, essentially saying, you do realize Errol Flynn was a pedophile, right? So that got me thinking because actually I had heard the story about Errol Flynn having been arrested and charged with statutory rape in the 1940s. So it actually gave me pause. And I felt like it deserved addressing. So, first of all, am I a hypocrite for enjoying an Errol Flynn film when I have been highly upset with pedophilia apologists in our halls of power, in our government? Am I a hypocrite for doing this? That's question one that I need to think about. Question two is the question that has come up a lot lately about how do we separate the art from the artist? How do we enjoy good art made by bad people? So here is my usual feeling about that kind of thing. Here is my test. And when can I separate art from artist and when can't I? And why I feel this way, why I can still enjoy an Errol Flynn film and still be disgusted about what went on with Jeffrey Epstein and his buddies. First of all, when it comes to performers, I have a strict policy that is, well, pretty much it's a losing game in our information saturated world with the internet and social media. My thing is when it comes to performers. And by that I mean actors, singers, people who play musical instruments, people who perform work that was written by others. When it comes to those people, my approach to their personal lives is la 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 la. I don't want to know. I'm not listening. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear about that. I just don't want to know details about these people's personal lives. I don't want to know who they vote for. I don't want to know who they sleep with. I don't want to know who they're married to. I don't want to know. I just would rather enjoy the performance and the character that is being presented to me on screen. That's what I want to see. And yet again, it's a losing battle because there is so much of that. And there was a lot of that in the 1930s as well. There was a lot of that in the 40s, 50s, 60s. A lot of details would come out about the stars' personal lives, and there'd be shock and there'd be scandal, but not nearly because, of course, back then they didn't have the internet, so not nearly at the level that we see it nowadays. But still, it was a thing, and unsavory behavior could indeed wreck people's careers. But for me, what I want to see when I watch a film like Robin Hood or Captain Blood or Singing in the Rain, because people have been trying to get nasty things about Gene Kelly in my head, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear it. Because these people are playing characters, and it's the characters I'm interested in, not the private life of the actor who is bringing them to life. So here is where I do believe a line can and should be drawn, and that is, how much money are you putting in their pockets? I can see why people might want to boycott singers and artists, singers and actors and musicians who are alive today and still profiting by the performances that they give. That when you learn something unsavory about them, you don't want to line their pockets. You don't want your money going to them to support a lifestyle that you heartily disapprove of or are even disgusted by. So there, I think you can, it would be hard to separate art from artist. You don't want to. Well, for example, some of the remarks that Tom Cruise has made in proselytizing Scientology. My husband and I have decided that, yes, we will still watch movies with Tom Cruise in them. We will still watch the Mission Impossible films, for example, but we won't pay to see them. We will not pay to see them. My husband recently went to see the last Mission Impossible film because he got a free ticket. So we don't want to line Mr. Cruise's pockets, but we can still watch his films because he is not Ethan Hunt. And if we watch Mission Impossible, we want to see Ethan Hunt, not, we want to be thinking about Ethan Hunt, not Tom Cruise. So yes, you don't want to line these people's pockets, but a lot of the art that I value most was performed by people who are no longer with us. They are no longer walking this planet, breathing the air, and receiving profits and residuals for their work. So do not, again, I would just rather not know. I would rather have blinders on when it comes to people who perform. I do not want to know about Frank Sinatra's mob connections. Just let me hear him sing. So, that's performers. Now, I adopt a little bit of a different attitude when it comes to content creators, when it comes to writers and people who are responsible for the words that we hear and read and the images that we see. Where that's concerned, it's much harder for me to separate art from artist because their ideas, their viewpoints, for example, if a person is a misogynist, that viewpoint is going to make its way into the art that they produce. It's going to be a part of their work. And because of that, that's where I cannot separate art from artist if the ideas get into the work. So I will avoid writers who are very publicly racist, misogynistic, etc., at least from a pleasure reading standpoint. From an academic standpoint, and when it comes to teaching literature, sure, there are problematic authors whose works deserve to be taught, deserve to be read in academic, in an academic context. But when it's just something I'm reading for pleasure or watching for pleasure, uh-uh. So now I get to the other question, the harder question. How can I, in good conscience, enjoy an Errol Flynn film and still be troubled by the Epstein files and by pedophilia apologists in our government? Well, the best answer I can come up with, and maybe I'm not acquitting myself with this, you know, maybe you need to make up your own minds about it. But the difference between a performer like an Errol Flynn or a Gene Kelly or anybody else who might have unsavory behaviors um, in behind the scenes, and the people who are reportedly on the or in the Epstein files. Gene Kelly and Errol Flynn don't affect policy. They're not writing the laws. They're not policymakers, and we don't, or we shouldn't at least, look to these men to set policy. Well, we don't look to these men to set policy, but we also don't look to these men to provide an example. We don't look to them to get an idea of here is how a good person or a moral person should behave. They're not role models. The characters they play may be role models. Robin Hood in the 1938 film, he is certainly a role model, but Errol Flynn's not. So they're not role models. They're not supposed to be examples. But people who get elected to public office, who are supposed to represent the people, I do think that we can maybe draw moral, ethical lines. This is not acceptable if you want to present yourself as a leader and a representative. And if you want to present yourself as someone whom young people, or really any people who are forming their ideas of ethics, morality, etc., should look up to. So that's my answer. It may not be a very good answer, but I did feel like I needed to address the question. And I'm not, I want to make this very clear, I'm not by any stretch annoyed with the friend who asked me the question or pointed this out. It was actually a good thinking exercise. Made me think, made me consider, okay, do I have a responsibility to maybe do a little bit of investigation into the personal lives of the actors and actresses in the movies that I'm going to talk about in my 1930s project? Again, my policy is no, 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 not listening when it comes to performers. I do not want to know about their personal lives. I'm only interested in what they are performing. So, that being my own perspective, at least as far as actors and actresses who are long since dead and gone and can in no way profit from their performances. So that's the approach that I'm going to be taking as I move further into this 1930s project. I'm going to mention some people who really did live good, exemplary lives, but there may be a few that didn't. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you with the next one.